When we used to have like a studio of people that would cheer, and that was like your cue. so for Kenneth Leonard's first appearance on...
I'll sort out the sound in just a moment.
Church and state. We have a crew that has grown so big, and we have amazing people on that crew that we're going to show you now because they are very special and they put a lot of time into this.
Oh yeah.
A lot of effort educating themselves how to do things and then doing all the things. It takes a while. Thank you all very much. And there's even more people than that behind the scenes. Just want to let you all know that you have options to support the ACA. So we have some merchandise that you are free to purchase. That includes t-shirts and mugs and bumper stickers and all kinds of cool stuff like that. You are also welcome to join. You can become a member, and then that way you can have access to a few more emojis, and you can have your name. I think I saw somebody in the chat has little stars around their name, or actually you get highlighted.
It's cold in the UK.
So I'm told you get highlighted in the chat. So all kinds of little perks. And then we also have a fundraiser that we're doing that you can donate. There's a donate button right below the chat on YouTube. And so you can use that button to donate directly to the ACA rather than doing like a super chat and then YouTube takes a cut of it. So if you want to donate all of your money to the ACA, well, if you want all of the money you donate to go to the ACA.
Do it.
Don't even think about it. Just go for it. It'll be fine.
Thank you so much for any donations. It goes straight to the organization.
It'll be fine.
If you're in America and you're into Amazon, of course, you can do donations via Amazon. We have several ways. So can't do that in the UK, by the way.
It can be very overwhelming, and so we've got some Facebook groups for you that
Amazon
you can
don't
use
allow you to do it in the UK
find some community
for an
because
American
you
charity.
tend to lose people. So there's
I've tried.
a public group, and then there's also a private group
Doesn't
in case
work.
it's dangerous for you to be out as an atheist, because that is actually a real thing for a lot of people. And then we also, I just want to bring up the crew cam one more time because they're amazing and awesome. I wish you could have the audio. It's like a circus. It's awesome.
Yeah, they're more entertaining than we are.
They really are. But anyway, so we can. Well, actually, so Kenneth Leonard, thank you for joining me and being my co-pilot.
Oh yeah.
Did you want to say anything before we go to callers?
I mean, I'm a skeptic. I'm on the internet. I do stuff and talk to people and try to communicate the importance of skepticism. And I'm an atheist and I've been an out atheist for a long time. So that's pretty much it. There'll be a link tree and all that stuff. But yeah, let's talk to some people.
Yay! Okay, Let's see if we can help some people out. All right, so Arnie has been waiting a while. It says that he wants this person wants to discuss the idea that you can't choose your beliefs. It says that you're kind of almost an atheist. So what did you want to talk about? What did you want to talk about, Arnie? You're on with Jenna and Kenneth.
Jenna looks like she's in an anechoic chamber.
Hey,
yay!
So basically, I'm sort of torn between two notions of, I don't know, having some cognitive dissonance. One I got from Matt Dillahunty, one notion, and that's that you don't choose your beliefs. That totally makes sense to me, that you're either convinced or you're not convinced. But on the other hand, and this might be something that's left over from I'm an ex-Mormon, I used to be a Mormon. This notion that people tend to believe what they want to believe, sort of a motivated reasoning angle. And I have both of those seem to make sense to me. And so I'm having trouble sort of resolving that conflict, because does that make sense? Like, where do you draw the line between people not being able to choose their beliefs? For example, I have a coworker that I debate all the time with, like theology, and she's a Calvinist. I'm an ex-Mormon, and so sometimes I'm putting on my Mormon hat, and then sometimes I'm putting on my little Matt Dillahunty hat.
You can believe what you want to believe.
And
I'm not quite sure it works like that.
That her basic position is that I'm choosing not to believe the Bible and the scriptures the way she does because I want to sin.
That is a ridiculous attitude, because you want to sin.
Not true in my case. I can't imagine scenarios in which that might be true. Like someone really could maybe choose not to believe something because it didn't, comport with what they want to be true.
Well,
go ahead.
So can you understand? So put yourself in the shoes of somebody who, say, just like that, doesn't want to believe. Yes, that is a possibility of being a thing, but that doesn't mean that they actually don't believe. And so, if are you saying that both concepts make sense to you, or are you saying that you're confused why she is attached to that concept?
It's on the edge. This Arnie, his friends on the edge are basically saying, I think that if we assume you're assuming not to believe, or you're choosing, not to believe, so therefore you're an atheist, because you want to sin. Basically, that's tantamount, surely, to saying atheists are atheists because they wish to sin. I think that's what his friend is saying. That is a ridiculous argument. So it's just, okay, I've got so many images coming into my head now, which I can't really discuss on the channel because I don't want to get aggressive, and I don't want to start talking about all of the religious articles that you see, or sorry, I should say all of the articles that you see in the newspapers, in the media, in the print media, about religious people and the sins that they have committed. We'll not mention places like Ireland, etc. That's just an outrageous thing to say.
Both concepts make sense to me, but they appear to me to be in conflict with each other. Because if you want to believe something, and so aren't you sort of choosing to believe it?
You can, if you believe in a God, at any moment you can say, you know what, this is too hard, I don't want to believe in a God anymore. You can do that. But that doesn't mean that you have actually changed your mind. That doesn't mean that your beliefs have changed, because when you that's the thing about changing beliefs, is that that's something that you discover has changed. It's just, have you ever found out you were wrong about something?
Never. Yeah, of course.
And the moment before you found out you were wrong, you had this belief and you thought you were right. But then there's a moment where you found out you were wrong, and it's like, oh, it wasn't a decision. It's more of a discovery. It's, oh, I don't believe that anymore. And I had actually thought before I became an atheist, the same kind of thing, that I was like, oh, well, you know what? I don't really believe it because it just doesn't make sense or whatever. But then there was also a moment after that where I finally had really been looking into my epistemology and how I came to know things, and then came to realize, oh my God, it really doesn't make sense. Have you come to any moments does any of that sound familiar to you?
Yeah. Let me give an example that's outside of theology. So, like, I have a problem with, I have a weird relationship with Oreos. So,
the biscuits.
I said, okay, I have these Oreos, right? I'm going to put them right by my bed because my house is so crowded. I have nowhere else to put them. There's just nowhere else to put them. So I'll put them by my bed. I'm not going to eat them all in one night. And so then I eat them all in one night. Now, would you say I'm choosing to believe something in that case? Like, obviously, deep down on some level, I know.
What's he choosing to believe? That he won't eat them?
Is that a choice I'm making?
See, you're getting into the topic now of free will. Which, go for it, Kenneth.
So the Oreos are perfect. So let's think about, there's two separate things that your coworker and you are thinking about. So the first question is the question of whether you like Oreos. Okay, you have a belief that you like Oreos. You have become convinced that the proposition Arnie likes Oreos is true. Okay, so that state of being convinced, that state of liking Oreos, is separate from the reasons why you may like Oreos. And if someone were to say to you, well, you like Oreos because they're delicious, not because of their nutritional value, that may or may not be the case. You might not have any control over why you like the Oreos, whether the reason you like them is because they're delicious, you may like the texture, you may like the taste, the sweetness, whatever the case may be. Or you may look at the nutrition facts and think this is exactly what I should be putting in my body, and therefore you value the Oreos and like them and want to eat them. Do you see how there's two separate issues that are on the table?
Including the Oreos on the table.
I think
milk.
So.
Yeah.
So, okay, so back to the theology thing. If you say, like, Oreos, it might have been a bad example because has nothing to do with sinning per se. But if someone, would you agree that if someone, and I don't believe in the concept of sin myself personally, but the coworker that I was debating with, that's kind of where she tends on it, is that my motives for believing or not believing the scriptures the way she sees them are influencing whether or not I see the light or the truth or whatever. And although I disagree with me in my case, I don't think that's the reason I'm seeing the way things I do. Well, she has a valid point in that people are influenced by their motives as to what they believe. So if you're motivated to, say, be an atheist, right? Like, you don't want to believe, and I'm not saying this is the case, but
this guy's got it all wrong.
If someone is motivated, they don't want to believe a God. They don't want to believe in that. Wouldn't it be fair to say that their motives might be influenced by that?
I don't think so. Because whether or not you're convinced by something or not is essentially involuntary. If you're sitting there going, I really don't want to believe there's a God, or if you're like, I really do want to believe there's a God, that really has nothing to do with whether you are in fact convinced of whether or not there's a God. When I was a Christian coming out of Christianity, I really for a while wanted the Bible to be true. But I did not believe that it was at a certain point. I had become convinced that it was just a man-made thing. There wasn't any reason to believe the claims that the Bible made were true. So it didn't matter if I wanted to believe it was true for the sake of having a community and my family and everybody be happy with me. I was not convinced anymore.
So this is kind of trickling into the so self-deception it really is a thing. You know, you do have the ability to lie to yourself. That's how we have, like, domestic violence. You know, people lie to themselves. They say, well, you know what, it won't happen again, and then it does. But the thing is, I think that has a lot to do with conditioning, not necessarily with a thought process. I think that it's just repetition. These people have been told these things over and over and over and over again. And I mean, brainwashing is a real thing. you know, and you don't necessarily have control over that.
So the self-deception could still be there and be.
Oh, there's no doubt that self-deception is like something. Human beings are, if we ever do something and we kind of get in trouble, or we're afraid that we're going to get in trouble, we have an accident, we break something, we do something that we didn't think was wrong, but suddenly we realize it is wrong, and we're going to get in trouble, then there is a real predisposition, I think, with people, that what they'll do is they'll look for a way out, they'll look for a reason why it wasn't them, it was an accident, it will be something that does not get them in trouble. The defense mechanisms kick in. Now, sometimes when that happens, I would argue, especially when you're younger, because when you're older, I think you start to learn the fact that when you do something wrong, it isn't the end of the world. If it's an honest mistake, you actually get a lot more credit for actually just admitting, okay, it was a mistake, I'm really sorry, it won't happen again. But I think when you're younger, you don't quite see it that way. You don't see the options, you just think, whoa, I'm in trouble. Okay, so the defense mechanisms kick in, and what tends to happen is you could easily end up then making up a lie. It wasn't me. I was doing this, or it happened by accident because of this, and it's not quite the truth. Okay, so you end up lying. But the weird thing about human beings is that we have this ability then to believe the lie, believe our own lie, even though we know it's a lie. We definitely can do that, and it's something that we need to try and resist if we can. Try not a joke, not quite telling the whole truth as because you're sort of having a joke with someone is one thing, but actually lying for some inherent reason that will get you out of trouble or give you some kind of an advantage in a situation is not great, and we need to try and learn to move above that kind of thing. So definitely you can convince yourself of things that you know are not true. However, when it comes to your belief, I believe, it is my feeling that you view things, you decide whether you think it's the truth or not. And I'm not convinced by the argument, and therefore I can choose my beliefs. I don't think it quite works like that in your mind. Your mind processes information. You decide what you think you feel is the truth of the situation. And I don't think it's just a conscious, almost like I could flick a coin, and if it's heads, I'll believe it. If it's tails, I don't. And then that's my position. I don't think it's like that. You can say you believe something, but if you don't, then you know you don't. I don't think you have that much of a decision over whether you do or don't believe any proposition. But I think what you do have is control over the issue of, and I will actually get some information or some evidence to try and make me form that decision. You can then change your mind.
Real, but that doesn't mean you're choosing to be self-deceived.
Right.
Because
like you have been deceived already.
This is not really
and now
science,
you're just continuing the deception without even realizing it.
Plan. Sorry,
I encounter what your coworker is saying to you. I've encountered it for years of people telling me this. They cite Romans and they talk about how biblically I know that there's a God and I'm suppressing the truth and unrighteousness so that I can live my sinful atheist life. They'll tell me that I'm not even an atheist, in fact. So the question becomes, well, is that true? That you have a book that says it is, but is it? And how can we go about determining whether it is or not? And I don't know what your coworker's theology is, but based on what you said, she's saying to you, yeah. So, well, I mean, that throws another wrench into it, because under Calvinism, salvation is just a gift. I mean, they'll cite Ephesians 2 and talk about how, you're elected and all that stuff. So, but we don't need to get into all that craziness. But I would just, if I were you, not that you asked, I would go about talking to her about whether or not the claims she's making are actually true, and get into a conversation about how can we test that? How can we go about finding out whether or not what you're saying is consistent with reality?
Have her call us.
Yeah. Oh, that would be me, of course.
Okay, no promises. I would love for her to call in. That would be awesome. Yeah. But all right, food for thought.
So-
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Arnie.
I'm not
Good
sure
luck.
about the concept of a friend that
right,
basically
thanks.
says, "I think you're doing this because you want to sin."
Um,
I'm not
Oh,
sure
I'd be like,
that's
have
a
fun
Or
sinning,
is that
Arnie.
like telling the truth?
Like,
See, oh man, free will is such a fun
so.
practical experiences and
The YouTube video.
Sorry, just moving forward here.
Hello. Yeah, I watched the YouTube video of Matt Dillahunty talking with Jordan Peterson, and it frustrated me because biology was left out of the discussion. And an example of that was the question of, is it good to be alive? And biology tells us if we're not alive, we can't pass on our genes, we can't perpetuate the species.
okay.
So in that regard, it's good.
Hang on. If we're not alive, we can't pass on our genes. That's not true. You can donate sperm, and then you could die. The sperm still exists. You can pass on your genes then. So maybe that's not what Michael's getting at, but it's not true to say you can't pass on your genes unless you're alive.
To be alive.
Okay.
Uh,
So what is it that you disagree
yeah,
with?
there was, well, it wasn't that I disagreed. It was that aspect was left out of the discussion. That we have these basic biological drives underpinning what we do. Things like being civil to one another.
Is a good thing.
Every social species, from insects through fish, through birds, through mammals, has social constraints on their behavior in order to perpetuate the society. And we as humans,
I don't know what that means.
thinking beings, we follow these drives, but then we rationalize why we do it. And
Okay.
some of us say we do it because God wants us to do it, and some of us say we do it because that's the ethical way to treat our fellow human beings we wouldn't want them to treat
Right.
differently.
Okay.
But underlying it is this evolutionarily derived drive.
So
I'm not sure where the question
are
is
you
here.
are you a biologist?
I'm a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist. Okay.
That's no then.
Interesting. It's funny. The first question that I had coming out of religion, actually, that kind of got me to this journey was how do we know what we know? Or no, sorry, it wasn't that. It was why do we want what we want? That's what I was trying to figure out. And that was the first time that I had Googled something and didn't get like a black and white, easy to accept answer. I got all kinds of like explanations of why we don't really exactly know. And I was like, wait a second, how do we not know this? I mean, yeah, it's complicated, but the thing is, I'm not a biologist. I can't educate anybody about how I know that biology is what's determining what I'm doing. I just know that from what I've learned, from several different topics, I have come to the conclusion that I think that nature and nurture are why we do what we do. But Kenneth,
I'm just not sure I understand what the point or what the question is. I mean, if you're just saying that you felt like in a conversation between two people who aren't here, they didn't talk enough about biology.
Right.
I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to tell us, Michael, or ask us.
No,
Well,
I'm not sure what the question is.
We can rationalize all we want about human behavior, and we can tell ourselves these stories about the why we do things. But underlying that is these evolutionary derived biological drives.
okay,
And if you want to make a really deep dive into why we want what we want or why we do what we do, there's an excellent book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky.
Well, I hate to cut you off. I really appreciate
Don't know where
this,
this
and
is going,
I
yeah.
appreciate your insight. I'm just curious what we're getting to with this call.
Just that when I watched this video with your colleague, that the biology was left out, and I think the biology is an important part of the equation.
You might be right. The best way to get a hold of him probably would be to email him.
Yep.
You can email him at matt@atheist-community.org, and then you can try to talk to him.
And it's actually a pretty good
or you can call
debate
again when he's on.
between Matt and Jordan.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for calling, Michael. I'm sorry that we weren't
It's
more
on
helpful.
YouTube.
Thanks,
It's available.
No problem. Bye.
All right.
So good thing to
let's
watch.
try that again.
I'll try and remember to shove it in the comments below.
Here's somebody who needs assistance.
Hey, this city
Kurt
talking
in
now, my
Colorado
friend.
had a falling out with a friend 15 years over his religion. Is it worth patching up? Thank you, Kurt, for calling. You're on with Jenna and Kenneth. Do you think it's worth patching up?
It's hard to say. It's been on my mind. It's been about 6 months now. It's been on my mind a lot more lately. And I just wanted to talk to other atheists who experience something similar.
Ooh, it's gone really quiet.
Get other interpretations of the event. That's all right.
Okay, we're oscillating.
Sure. So do you mind if I ask what happened? Like what his religion was that told him he can't hang out with you or whatever?
Well, yeah. So I'll give you the scenario. So we've been pretty close to best friends, us and another mutual friend of ours, for about 15 years now. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've really been getting heavy into Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've been having conversations back and forth about stuff like pro-life.
Is it just me? He's oscillating.
Biology, given that my background is in biology. And we bumped heads a lot over that stuff. He's claimed to kind of want to know what's true, but he only cares about really what fits into his new worldview based on his religion. So I'll give you events that occurred. So I'm also a service member. I was serving overseas up until October of last year. My orders got cut prematurely, so I didn't really have anything lined up past that. So I called him up and asked if I can crash in his guest room. So he let me crash for a couple weeks, which was great. And one morning, we're just sitting on the couch drinking coffee, normal day. And I'm going through, I don't know if you're familiar with the website, I effing love science.
No, but sounds cool.
It's actually pretty great.
Okay.
It basically takes published articles in scientific journals and then dumbs them down.
Hey, can I interrupt you really, really quick, Kurt? I'm so sorry to ask this, but
Sure.
just to make sure that everybody can hear what you're saying, because we're having to struggle a little bit, can you just try to make sure that you keep your mouth as close to the mic as possible, because you're kind of fading in and out.
Sure. Here, let me stop pacing as I do when I'm.
Oh, God.
I do that too, actually.
Pacing near a mic. That's why.
So it tries to release the energy so it doesn't build up. All right.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a nice little site that takes scientific lingo, dumbs it down, layman's terms, and then links all the articles in it so you can do your own research.
You're doing it
So
again.
basically, I scroll through that and I see one that talks about slaves and pyramids and how new evidence suggests that people who built the pyramids weren't slaves. So we're discussing this very nonchalantly, and his wife comes out, irritated, and makes a snide remark saying, "Oh, well, if he believes there's no God, so of course he doesn't believe there were ever slaves in Egypt." And I'm like, hold on, that's quite the leap, right? So I'm like, I take the opportunity to clarify, and I say, no, I'm not saying that, and there's a difference between believing there's no God and not believing not believing someone when they say there is a God. So I'm trying to explain that to her, and she comes back with the quick, well, then prove there's no God. And I'm like, well, hold on. I'm trying to get to the first point. You can't prove a negative. And then, my friend actually chimes in here and says, hey, yeah, it's true. You can't prove a negative. And I'm like, okay, here, look, I'll show you. Ready? prove fairies don't exist. Now, this is where the argument.
Oh, did we lose him?
Did we lose him?
I think we did. Okay. Call back. We'll get to another caller, but we'll come back to you if you can. I'm so sorry. Get him back. Cool, right? You know, it's a kind of a. But the thing is that it's complicated, and it's really kind of friendship is, and it can change over time. You know, it can be really, really tough right now, but then over time, sometimes
Egyptians
it gets a
had
little bit
slaves.
easier. So
it can always be a good thing to just remind people, like, listen, I love you. Just digging into how we can know things, because it sounds like you're up against works.
It's not. I just don't like you anymore, so I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah.
Have that conversation. Curious more
about
with Jenna and Kenneth.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
We're doing pretty good. We're just curious what your thoughts.
I'm
what your question
feeling
is.
zen.
I watched I watch this show all the time, definitely on YouTube, and I was always curious about how a true atheist felt about Buddhism and, you know, Zen meditation and all that.
Well, it's going to depend completely person to person. I'm curious more about you. You said that you identify as spiritual rather than theistic. Can you tell me what that means?
Well, I used to be a devout Christian in my life, you know, for the longest period. And I found that Christianity brought a lot of negativity out of me. And I found that Buddhism helped me find peace with that. You know, it's almost like I felt like I was leaving a cult. And it helped me find peace with moving away from Christianity.
So you still believe that there's something out there, or do you still believe that there's a God? Like, what do you believe?
I believe the world is what we make it to be.
So you believe that if we wanted there to be a God, we could make it up, and it was there?
No, nothing like that. More like the world is what we make it. You know, if I want to go, let's say, do positive things, I'm going to spread positivity to everyone. You get what I'm saying?
Well, what I'm more trying to understand is not necessarily how you look at the world or how you approach life. I'm more kind of wondering what is your belief currently? What belief do you hold about what there is that's quote unquote out there? Do you believe that there's just the universe, or do you believe that there is a being, or, you know, what is it that you believe? I'm just trying to understand.
I believe I believe that, you know, we're all a part of the universe, like in a way that we all have that energy inside of us, you know, and we're all a part of that universe. So, like, if we die, you know, we'll just blend back into the universe, you know what I mean? Like, we never existed.
Okay.
Just energy.
Go for it, Kenneth.
Well, you're reminding me of, like, an ex-girlfriend I had a long, long time ago who would use words like spiritual and energy, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And I'd ask her, like, what do you mean? What does spiritual mean? And I don't think I've ever heard anybody define spiritual in a way that I walked away feeling like I had a clear understanding of what it means. So I got to be honest with you, I don't know enough about Buddhism to have much of an opinion. I know there are secular Buddhists. I like the idea of, you know, finding peace with your circumstances and your surroundings.
All life is in a cycle of death and rebirth called samsara. This cycle is something to escape from. When someone dies, their energy passes into another form. So the aim in Buddhism, I think, is to achieve nirvana, which is a state of enlightenment through the extension of the self.
I gotta tell you, the longer that you speak, the less I know what you actually believe. So
yeah, because the last thing you said, it kind of sounds. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous talking to y'all because, you know, I've never did this before, and
me neither, man.
To actually be there.
Yeah.
I understand. I
I'm
understand.
a little nervous, and but
go ahead.
Growing up, for me as a Christian, right? I just saw, it's like I was very devout. Like I'd read my Bible, and I would see things that were anti-gay or like pro-slavery and all this other stuff, right? And I would notice that my pastors and everything, they would ignore those verses of the Bible or try to justify it.
Right.
And I just thought that as delusional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I found these people that were all for it, and I just saw them as hateful people. And I think for me, the spirituality is trying to connect with other people and make their life better. If that's trying to make other people's lives better by trying to put myself in their shoes and trying to make sense of the world around me. I'm sorry, I might not be making any sense.
No, you're doing great.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask you a question though?
But, yeah.
So you've talked about how Christianity made you feel and about how Buddhism makes you feel. My brain keeps going to, what relationship does how you feel about the claims of Christianity or the claims of Buddhism, what relationship does that feeling have with whether or not the claims are true? Like, do you think that Christianity is true, but you left it because it just made you feel gross because of what you found in the Bible? I mean, like, where do you, how are your beliefs interacting with what you actually believe about reality? You know what I mean? It sounds like there's like, I'm wondering about a distinction between like practice and actual belief. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't really believe the Bible's real. I just think people wrote that Bible in a way that benefits the people that wrote it or that preach it.
Okay.
Well, the Bible's really.
It sounds to me like you have quite a bit of cognitive dissonance. Like you have a belief that do you still believe that there is some intelligent being out there? That's really what I want to kind of get at. Do you believe that at all? No. Then I would call you an atheist because like we had mentioned earlier, that an atheist is somebody who just doesn't have that belief, just like you had said. So, go ahead.
Like all this is still very, very new to me, and like, and I've never expected to be on the air with y'all. So, like I said, I'm very nervous still, and I'm trying to get over that. And I apologize for that if I'm not really coming off, or if you can't understand me. So I do.
No,
apologize.
you don't owe anybody an apology for any of this. I mean, you're asking questions, you're trying to figure out, what's real, and it sounds like you're approaching it all from a place of compassion and empathy and wanting to do things that are, sort of promoting and increasing like health and happiness for other people. So I don't think you got to apologize.
It also sounds like you're kind of on the path to humanism because, you keep talking about how you feel like it's your job to, go out and be more empathetic and put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think that's kind of the basics of what a humanist is.
If I may be honest with you, like one of my very, very closest friends is homosexual. Okay.
And
for years, I would use Christianity as a justification for hating homosexuals.
Well,
okay.
Hate,
and
strong word.
When my friend, he was in front of me,
try and rule that
bawling
area
his eyes out, coming out as a
genderless
homosexual.
guys, of course.
That's kind of like the whole eye-opening moment for me, So it's like, how can I hate him? Because I love this guy. He's my best friend. He's my brother. But how could, God hate someone like him because he's a good guy? And it's kind of, and then I started, to be honest with you, I watched some Orn Raw videos.
Yeah, that's good.
And then started studying a little bit more science and just seeing how everything contradicted the Bible.
Yeah.
And it just kind of...
It sounds like you're okay, pardon my interruption. It sounds to me like you still have some cognitive dissonance. But you have come to the conclusion that there probably isn't anything, and now it seems to me like you're searching for some kind of purpose. Is that correct?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah. Might I recommend our Facebook groups, because there are so many people in our groups, the public one and the private one. If you don't feel comfortable coming out as anything yet, people who have been through very similar things to what you're going through right now, including us. You know, we're very familiar with what that kind of feeling is, and it's very uncomfortable. So while I empathize, I am also very excited for you, because I think that this is kind of a door to a much healthier outlook on life, in my opinion. Kenneth?
I would encourage you to look into a group called Recovering from Religion as well.
Yes.
Because, I mean, you may not be aware of this. There are thousands of people just like you going through what you're going through right now, and there's, I mean, groups like Recovering from Religion, groups like the ACA, and having these Facebook groups are incredible for connecting you to a community, so you can bounce these questions off people, talk about it, and recognize that what you are going through is very, very normal, and that you are in no way alone in your journey here as you're asking questions and figuring out which way is up as you come out of, Christianity.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you for taking the time.
You do.
Yeah, I was having a hard time at the beginning, but that's, and I was an evangelical at the time, being like, well, the Bible must be.
On to Joe in Virginia. It says that you want to know our thoughts on morality. I'm curious if you would mind sharing your thoughts first, because
I am pro-morality.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
Hi, Joe. You're on with Jenna and Kenneth.
Hey, how are you, Jenna? How are you? And how are you, Kenneth?
Hey.
You're doing good.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. It's gone quiet again.
If you don't mind, could you please try to keep your phone a little bit closer to the microphone, because you're fading away quite a bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really have any view on morality. I was just wondering what your views were.
What do you mean you don't have any views on morality?
Well,
is it that you're confused?
No, I just don't think under atheism there really is any sense of right or wrong.
This is perfect.
Go for it.
I was going to ask you out of the gate, what do you mean by morality? Because when I'm talking about morality, I'm talking about the effects that my actions have on other people, and how we make assessments about the consequences of those actions. But a lot of people, when you talk to them about morality, they're talking about what's going to make God happy, which is a totally different discussion. So when you say morality, a good place for us to start might be going, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say morality is, simply, I guess it's the concept of something being right or wrong, the way we ought to be as opposed to ought not to be, the way we're supposed to, treat people as opposed to not treat people.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Is there such thing as right and wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's the way that you're wording that question is tricky. Like, do you mean that there is a physical, tangible right and wrong? No. But do I think that we as humans have put our brains together and come to some really good conclusions about how to stay alive and how to stay healthy and happy as best as we understand? I think that that concept does exist, yes.
Okay, you said we have come to a conclusion. Who's this we?
Society.
We as humans, as intelligent beings, the ones that are thinking.
Human? Okay, so you'd say the Nazis were thinking, right?
I think that a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and people act according to what they think is right. And I think that there is a reason that the Nazis lost.
Okay, well, this conversation got really weird really quick.
There wasn't really wrong what they were doing. They just lost the war.
I didn't say that.
Well,
I said that there was a reason, and I think that it was because the majority of the world came to the conclusion that what they were doing is harmful and we don't support it. And that's how we get people to stop, because there is no objective leader up in the sky to control all of this. We are the ones, unfortunately, that have to handle problems like that. And that's why we had such a devastating war and so many people died trying to stop this, because the fact is that whether I agree with that sentiment, the Nazis believed that they were right. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm trying to do this, to prevent more Nazis from thinking that they're right. And by doing that, in order to do that, I'm trying to show how we can start evaluating how we know things. I think that's what it kind of comes down to. Kenneth,
It's a little bit more complicated.
I just have a bajillion thoughts. Like, Joe, like from your perspective, what makes an action right or wrong?
That's a good question.
I'm not convinced that Joe is serious.
I would say,
not convinced yet. Might be.
I just don't think you can ground any sort of anything right or wrong in a naturalistic term.
So what does that mean, to ground something?
Well, so if you're saying, Joe,
some sort of actual right and wrong, there must be something beyond each person's personal opinion.
Why do you?
So this is what I'm asking you, Joe. Is like so where is it? Where do you think that grounding is? What makes something right or wrong?
I would say I think it's, for me at least, I think for there to actually be a right or wrong, there needs to be something beyond us, a standard beyond us, where we can say love is good.
Why do you think that there necessarily needs to be something more than what we have come to a conclusion about?
You just said we came to a conclusion. Who is this we?
I mean, we as a human species.
I said abortion is wrong, and you say it's right. We, are different, or you say
okay.
It's
So,
right,
so can I explain? Can I explain my usage of the word we? So I don't, when I say we in this particular topic, when I'm talking about how quote unquote we know things, I am not speaking necessarily well, actually I kind of am. I'm not talking about just you and me. I am talking about over time, we have had many people who have learned and shared many things. And over time, we have come to discover things that have been very helpful in discovering how we know what's true, which like the scientific method. So I'm talking about, when I say we know things, I'm saying that we, meaning the humans and specifically scientists, have come to conclusions and verified things with enough education, more education than I have, to verify things that can help us, navigate the world more efficiently. Does that help?
No, I don't really even understand what you're talking about.
Let me ask you this, Joe. Let me see if I can simplify things for you. Let me try to simplify things. Joe, sorry, there's a delay. I don't mean to talk over you. So does the name Euthyphro mean anything to you?
Yeah, I know it is. Is it good because God commands it, or the vice versa? Yeah,
the idea was, for those who may not know who are watching, so there's this dialogue in Greek philosophy where there's a question that is posed of whether something is good because it's like pleasing to the gods, or if the gods saying something like just makes it good. Does that, like, does good please the gods, or the other way around? Okay, so like there's a lot of ways that this conversation can go. Where does this goodness come from? The property of something being right. You're saying it has to be grounded necessarily in something beyond human beings. I'm not sure why that would be the case, but like, can you tell me why that would be the case?
Well, I can tell you what I guess some Christian philosophers think about the Euthyphro dilemma.
Why don't we talk about what you think?
Or whichever you think is the best, from these.
Well, I think the good is grounded in God. So God is the good, and all moral facts and commandments come from God.
So is that something that we're just starting off assuming, or is that something that you have actually fact-checked?
That's the solution to the Euthyphro dilemma.
So you have fact checked that. You have actually, you can prove that to us?
Look, I don't need to prove anything to you, but I'm just
asking, can you?
You can't prove anything to anyone. You can't prove anything to me, and I can't prove anything to you.
Well, that's not true. That makes me wonder what the point is of having a conversation, because I want to believe true things. So if you've got a good argument for why it is that we need a God for to solve this grounding problem, then I would want to come with you toward whatever's true.
Okay, so you want to know what's true. So was the Holocaust wrong? Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, what makes it wrong?
What makes it wrong would be that you've got a whole lot of unnecessary suffering and death afflicting a bunch of innocent people. And so if when we talk about
you can't identify what is wrong with the Holocaust.
Well, he's trying to lead me down into a thing. So I'm gonna let him do it. So if what we're talking about with right and wrong is this assessment of how our actions affect other people, then all of these suffering people would go on the scale toward a moral wrong. Okay.
So you're saying that we have moral obligations to other people,
depending on what our goals are. If our goal is to have
my goals or your goals or
humanity's goals. Humanity's goals.
Everybody's goals are different.
Humanity's goals.
That's why we have politics.
Humanity's goals collectively, and this is why I really appreciate what Sam Harris did with talking about a moral landscape. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Sam says that I don't appreciate at all, but this I like. So, this idea that there are peaks and valleys that we can attain morally if we're trying to promote human well-being or happiness. He doesn't say happiness; he goes with well-being.
Sorry, I muted him. Oh, he's still talking.
Well, let me ask you this, because you're talking about a genocide as your example. So in the Bible, there's plenty of examples of genocides. So when God commands the Israelites to destroy the Amalekites, is that a moral good because God commanded it?
I don't know. Would it be wrong under your philosophy?
Under mine? Well, there's the additional problem of not believing that the God is even real in the first place. But yeah, a genocide would be a moral disaster. It'd be wrong. Yes.
Hence, we have come to the conclusion that the Holocaust was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, Jenna, why is the Holocaust wrong? You have nothing.
Oh my God! Wrong. You know what? I don't really care what you have to say anymore.
Yeah, Joe, it doesn't feel like we're really, having a good faith discussion about this. I mean, that's why I tried to lay it out at the beginning to make it really clear that if what we're talking about is this assessment of how our actions affect others, then we can make moral judgments about the goodness or the badness depending on what our goals are, So if the goal is to have a society where the maximal number of people are flourishing and happiness and well-being are high and unnecessary suffering and pain is low, then we can make objective assessments about whether or not we're moving closer to or away from those goals. That's morality.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't
did we drop
really...
him?
Yeah, I did. Yes. Because I just think that he's a dishonest interlocutor, and I think that he's trying to catch us.
I kind of spotted that from about 20 seconds in.
But it says, I would like to discuss what it means to be spiritual. And you're questioning? Thank you for calling, Sven. You are on with Jenna and Kenneth.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. So, yeah, I heard earlier that Kenneth, I believe it was, he didn't know, he's never talked to someone and understood what spiritual means. And I always find that I don't know what fallacy will fall under, but it's very hard for me to believe that atheists don't comprehend what people mean by the soul or the spirit that humans and maybe even other animals contain that makes us unique from insects or trees or rocks, that there are different degrees of consciousness, and awareness.
Well, can I just really quickly? I'm sorry to cut you off, and I promise that I'm gonna let you finish. I'm Kanyeing right now. I'm gonna let you finish. But I know what I meant when I was a Christian. When I talked about spirituality, I believed that there was a soul and that I was connected to this, this deity that could hear my prayers and have a sort of relationship with me. I've heard other people talk about this sort of pantheistic, we're all one with the universe thing. I've heard people talk about believing that we have spirits or souls, but not necessarily that there's a God. So, I mean, all I'm saying is not that I can't understand what people mean when they talk about spirituality, but that I think because there's so much variance in what people mean when they use this word, that the word becomes sort of meaningless in most conversations up until the point that people specifically tell me what it is that they're talking about, because it could be anything in my experience.
Okay, what are you? There's a difference between a dogmatic spirituality like Christianity versus people who are spiritual, like the person earlier who called about Buddhism. I believe even a lot of rationalists up until the 18th century accepted in a way that there was a soul because, our rational brain does tell us that there is a unique difference between what we are doing and what evolution and other animals are doing.
That doesn't make sense. That sentence doesn't make sense.
That they don't behave anything the way that mammals, completely opposite of the way that human beings do.
Well, I mean, go ahead. I think you could probably go ahead.
I don't know about that one, man. Our rational brain tells us a lot of shit that isn't necessarily true.
Well, okay, so we have some scientists that are studying all kinds of different animals and insects and sea creatures. Man, sea creatures are like aliens. But there's to say that they don't have anything and we do. I mean, can we ever know that? Because we're not insects.
Well, I definitely say that we have something that they never do. I'm definitely closer aligned to panpsychism, where I believe that everything has a consciousness, like human beings are sentient, and consciousness is just a fundamental truth of reality. Like, even though your cup might not be sentient, your cup is consciously being a cup. Like the quarks do not fall out of being a cup.
Whoa! How can consciousness? Sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry. How can you have a consciousness without a brain?
Yeah, he linked consciousness there with reality. Reality will exist whether we exist or not. And I think he's on the edge of saying that consciousness is a property of the universe, in the sense of nothing to do with us. The universe has consciousness. This is an argument that is sometimes used. I don't know where Sven is intending to go with this, but there is an argument that for God, that human beings have consciousness, and the reason we have consciousness is because the universe has consciousness, and consciousness is some kind of, almost like in physics we would say, a conserved quantity. We have it because the universe has it. If the universe wasn't conscious, then we couldn't have consciousness. And the consciousness of the universe comes from the fact that, it was created by a God. Which there is, it's just, that's gibberish.
What does he mean by consciousness?
Like I said, it wouldn't be the cup that has consciousness, it would be the quarks that are fundamentally...
Oh man.
Absolute rubbish. The guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Quarks are fundamental particles. When he talks about quarks, basically, the ancient Greeks had this idea that if you take a lump of stuff and you divide it in half, you've got two halves. And you take one of those halves and you divide it again, you've got a quarter. Divide it again, you've got an eighth, a 16th, a 32th, a 64th, etc., etc. You keep dividing until eventually you reach a point where you can't divide the small thing anymore. Obviously, in practice, you couldn't do it with a knife or a scalpel. It gets too small. But the ancient Greeks had this idea that everything was basically built, of building blocks, basic building blocks from which everything is constructed. And those were the atoms. The ancient Greek for these lumps that were indivisible. The ancient Greek for indivisible is atomos, from which we get this idea of the atoms. Now, we have the periodic table of elements, which are the atoms that, if you like, make up they're the building blocks of everything around us, at least everything that has mass. and that's what we think of now as the atoms. However, this idea of divide, the atoms can't be divided. The atoms are the basic lumps that cannot be divided. This has turned out not to be true. An atom is not indivisible. An atom can be divided into protons, neutrons, and electrons. So then you ask the question, is a proton, a neutron, and an electron, can they be divided? Now, it turns out electrons cannot be divided. They are what the ancient Greeks were referring to in the sense of you cannot divide it. However, protons and neutrons can be. It's slightly more complicated than that, but protons and neutrons are made of even smaller particles, and I'm using the word smaller cautiously here, even smaller particles called quarks. Now, quarks are indivisible. But physicists, because of this misuse of the word atom now, physicists have a different word for something that the ancient Greeks were referring to as indivisible. Physicists have a different word now for basic particles that make up everything, and you can't divide them. We call them fundamental particles. And there are three families of fundamental particles. There are the quarks, and quarks come together in lumps, in small collections. Any particle that is made of quarks is called a hadron, and there are basically two types. There's the larger type, which is made of 3 quarks as a little collective, and there's the smaller hadrons, which are made of a quark and an antiquark. There is something called antimatter. So there's large hadrons and there's the small hadrons. The large hadrons, that's 3 quarks. They're called baryons. Particle physics, I should point out here, is just an exercise in memory, which is quite cruel thing to say, and a particle physicist will be extremely upset with me for saying that. The smaller ones, the smaller hadrons, are called mesons. So when CERN had the Large Hadron Collider, it was hadrons, particles, but the big ones, the large ones, they're called baryons. So it was a baryon hitting a baryon. It was basically a proton hitting a proton. The Large Hadron Collider was a proton colliding with a proton. Okay, I'm not quite sure why echo jumped in there, but I'll ignore that. And so quarks are fundamental particles. They cannot be split, and they make up protons and neutrons, and as well as other things, but mainly they make up protons and neutrons, and they've got absolutely nothing to do with consciousness. I'm going to carry on now, but I'm going to go back about 10 seconds so we can hear the last bit again.
And you're getting...
What does he mean by
consciousness? Like I said, it wouldn't be the cup that has consciousness. It would be the quarks that are fundamentally...
Oh man, you're getting into quantum physics, man.
You can never see them being still. Well, because if you want to talk about cups, we can look at it like amoebas and viruses. No one would argue they're sentient, but there is a lot of debate, especially over viruses, whether they classify as alive or not alive. That's because they may not think, but they do have to be conscious of their environment and aware to be able to get food. And amoeba have to be conscious to reproduce and to split.
So
conscious, I think,
I find this topic fascinating. Sven, really quick, I'm so sorry. I find this topic completely fascinating, and I actually am really excited to get more into quantum physics, which I will eventually. But the fact is that I know squat about quantum physics. I know that there's some fascinating things, and I know that there's some things that I don't understand. But I can't.
Have you ever heard any of the modern philosophers talk about panpsychism, at least?
I have not.
Whoa, okay, I didn't hear that. What did he say?
I haven't, but I've got so many questions, because like what you just said, my mind went...
There's some things that I don't understand, but I can't.
Have you ever heard any of the modern philosophers talk about panpsychism, at least?
I have not.
I haven't, but I've got so many questions, because like what you just said, my mind went to, you're saying that there has to be awareness for like an amoeba to do what an amoeba does.
No, that's not true.
I don't know why we would think that it's true. If, for example, if there's a computer program and you're playing a video game and a character, like a non-playable character in the game is programmed to move in a square, does that character in the video game have to have some sort of awareness or consciousness or anything to move in that square? Or can it just be a function of the reality of that game that's what that thing does?
I find that to be a poor argument on that.
Okay, I'll give a better argument then. When a plant grows and the stem and the leaves move upwards towards the sun and the roots go downwards where the nutrients are, is that consciousness? Because basically it isn't. It's biochemistry. It's tropism.
Because that leads me down to then the question of, well, then what was the purpose?
Hold on, that wasn't an argument. That was a question.
This is a question. This is like a yes or no question.
Well, I hear about it a lot. Sorry.
Well, but can you please answer the question so that we can continue the conversation?
Yeah, I was.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was. Sorry. That leads to the idea of who's the programmer. Like if you compare the way amoeba is aware that there's food in front of it, so it can go and get it.
Oh God, quiet again.
To a computer sim going in a square, then that sim had a creator, and so therefore you would need to equate that amoeba had a creator.
I was really hoping to avoid that sort of rabbit track by saying the reality of that game, because as far as we know, the reality that we live in behaves according to certain parameters, and as far as I know, there's no reason to think that there's a creator of this reality that we live in. So I was trying to draw an analogy there, imperfect as it may be.
Yeah, this is kind of pointless.
I don't know of any reason why an amoeba in our reality,
if it isn't pointless, it's not clear where he's going with this.
Necessitates some sort of awareness or consciousness. And I'm not sure what you mean by consciousness or spirituality at this point. Like the waters are getting muddier by the minute.
If it was
Sven initially started this with some vague comment about the fact that it kind of wound him up. I'm not quite sure that's the phrase he used, but it sort of winds him up when atheists. Now, as soon as you start that sentence, this is now provocative in not a good way. It winds him up that atheists basically sort of don't know what they're talking about when it comes to spiritualism, but then almost immediately he's hit back with, hang on, the word spiritualism or the concept of spiritualism means different things to different people. It's a bit like when they have people phone in here and they want to talk about the existence of a God, but the first thing you have to do is then define what you mean by that, because not trying to catch people out, but because it means different things to different people. But theists just don't seem to like that. They don't seem to like the idea that something gets batted back, but it's just so that you can have a conversation. And this is inherently part of the scientific method as well. When we start talking about things, we have to make sure that we define the parameters within which we're working. If we're going to start using technical terms, we have to define them. And I am not completely convinced that Sven is open to a discussion rather than actually calling up here just to mouth off. I'm not convinced. I could be wrong there, and I could be sort of being horrible to him, which I hope I'm not.
Needs food, and then it must go to the food.
If it didn't go to the food,
what else is that?
This is incredible, because what you're doing, this is why, and Dan Dennett has done some incredible talks about this, of how what Darwin established just turned our understanding of things on its head. If the amoeba doesn't go towards the food, the amoeba does not survive long enough to reproduce, and then we've got no amoebas. So the things that go toward the food, whether they're aware it's there or not, maybe they stumble across the food accidentally at the beginning, those are the ones that are going to be able to pass on their genes. So you're taking what we know about the world, what we know about biology, and like really inverting it back to like a pre-Darwinian understanding of why things do what they do.
Thoughts?
Definitely. I mean, panpsychism was initially introduced in Italy in like the 15th century, pre-Darwinism, and it's only recently in the past 5 or 6 years gotten new topics. And there was a philosopher who argued, Dan Dennett, or had a talk with Dan Dennett on philosophy for our times. So I see how you could relate it to a pre-understanding of Darwinism, but it's also just re-looking at what Darwinism found. And
that's
really going nowhere.
Yeah.
But it's definitely I don't know, for scientists and philosophers who, there's a lot of smart people who still hold on to their religion because it's just so powerful. And those who really get into the philosophy of what it means, like purpose and souls, panpsychism just seems to be a good explanation. And I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. It definitely makes sense to me that there's an innate awareness. And
I really appreciate.
I understand we upgraded levels of consciousness as we evolved as well. You can see that.
No, it's just
so
and amphibians and mammals
so
all have
much
more
here
awareness.
that's not being defined by Sven.
I'm sorry, I just want to say that I really appreciate your honesty right now, because what I heard you say was that it sounds like a reasonable explanation, right? Like it what else could it be, kind of thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sure, I would say more.
He doesn't want to say that because that leads him into a trap.
Agree with about the fundamental reality of the universe.
Dude, that's the whole problem. And I don't mean any disrespect here, but you're starting with the belief and then working your way backward to justifying the belief, and that is a really, really good way to be wrong. That's just confirmation bias. That's a problem. If what you care about is what's true, then that's a problem.
Can you see how that can be can get you to some wrong conclusions by saying, out of the options, this seems like the best one? Like, what if you don't have the right option as an option?
But I will say, I do, but I will say that's why I don't like the shift where empiricists led to prefer skepticism over rationalism and innate knowledge theory.
It's just more sentences with just words that are not defined.
It just doesn't convince me the
empiricism over rationalism. Empiricism is just based on the idea that we're using evidence.
I know that's not
wait. So you're saying that the skepticism side is equal to solipsism?
Or that it necessarily leads there?
That necessarily leads there, just like you say, the previous callers talking about morality and purpose. Yes. But
so
let's just move
forward. We're aware that we were being held to the ground. Okay, the question of what somebody had knowledge of morality threw me off.
We're actually kind of
I agree. We're going off now because I don't know where to go with that. Because in my brain, I can't put that as a knowledge statement or a knowledge debate. Maybe I'm at a crossroads, though.
Well, okay, so
that's fine.
Is
but
there
I don't
anything
see
that
how
you
two people talking about if slavery is good or bad is something is questioning the knowledge of.
Is he wandering again? What's happening to the volume?
Is a debate about the scientific truth of whether African Americans should be enslaved or not. I don't think that's something that. Do you see what I'm saying? Why I'm confused? That doesn't feel like science.
I do, and we're rabbit tracking all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an interesting thing, and it's relevant to American history because if you go back and look at the arguments for and against slavery, you had people on both sides asserting that God was telling them, yes, we should free the slaves. No, we absolutely should not. And it's like, well, how do we figure out what's legit here? Right. We got a bunch of people speaking for God and saying that God's speaking to them. But if what we're trying to figure out
I think we can easily knock down the claim that. Oh, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I think it's easy to knock down the claim that somebody said a deity spoke to them. Like, we throw around this word God when that's not a name. If you're talking about Yahweh, you also have people who say that Allah spoke to them or that Brahma spoke to them. So it's easily disproven that no one specifically talked to them. So we need to figure out what they mean before we can say what this person told them. By what do they mean this person told them? They innately mean that they had this feeling that they were being moved. So then we need to work on why they had that feeling. And if we go down that path, we're going to see that it is their history and their culture and their society that has pushed them to believe that slavery is good. And they also have this belief that there is a God who talks to you. So when you have a strong feeling that someone spoke to you, you're obviously not being spoken to. We can all agree on that by looking at the claims that there are many deities. Unless you look at,
we can agree on that, but you got like the majority of America would be like, what are you talking about? I talk to God every morning when I pray over my cornflakes, you know, so it's like, I understand what you're saying, but
that's why I called to talk about spiritualism. I think religious dogma is awful, and it does nothing to say this is just the way it's claimed, because we all are, you know, we all have our subjective beliefs and thoughts. So all we can work is on our subjective thoughts. So anytime you start with there's a dogma, then you're off to a bad start. I agree. That should be obvious.
I've got to tell you, on the subject of spirituality, it sounds like what you're talking about is sort of a collective consciousness, which, again, this is different from what other people mean when they talk about spirituality. So, like, I appreciate your call, and you've been very thoughtful and all that, but I don't feel like I'm any closer to understanding, broadly speaking, or feeling like the word spirituality makes any sense, like, collectively. Because it's I'm still sitting here going, it means different stuff to everybody I encounter.
Well, it will. Just like almost everything in the world means something different. That's why on this show, I appreciate that everyone always like, well, what do you mean by that? Because we say a word, a label, and then we expand upon it. And so when someone says they're spiritual, first you can, ask if they have a religious belief, so that you can just look at that dogma. You'll know what they mean.
Gosh.
But if just a layperson, maybe you haven't spoke to me, but I know many people who don't believe in a deity, but they say they're spiritual. They believe in ghosts, maybe. They believe in angels, maybe. They believe in demons, maybe. So I get what people mean when they say spiritual. They mean that there are
angels and devils if you don't
consciousness,
believe
spirits,
in
something happening other than just the human materialist, determinist world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Americans, like I've talked to the line about this, that, at least most people I know do not go straight from being religious to being atheist. They go to spiritual because it is a strong human intuition, and whether it's selfishness and something that we needed to survive evolutionally, there is an innate belief that we are different, whether that be superior or not. It seems that way to other beings.
I don't have that belief at all.
No, neither do I.
I hear you.
I was just saying that's what I know when people say they're spiritual, it means they're believing.
Yeah, how many people is this, Sven?
And not a dogmatic belief.
No, I understand. And
out of the millions,
like this is where I'm going to get hate mail, but the way that it looks to me generally is what people will say, like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And spiritual is this like giant net to catch all the other unjustified bullshit that people believe. So like it's, no, I don't believe that, but I do believe in this other stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I understand that atheists, for the most part, believe that it's bullshit, but there's a large population. You have people going into Star Child. Like so many people are searching for truth because empiricism and determinism, like we're taught in school and college, is just not convincing to a large portion of the population.
No, whether something's convincing or not has no bearing on
they don't
whether
understand
it's
it. That's
None.
the problem.
And I just want to make it like very clearly.
I think it is difficult for someone to say that I am not convinced by something if that person doesn't understand it. Empiricism is based on making observations from which you will then come up with ideas about how things work, what will happen in the future, the driving mechanism behind whatever you're looking at. It is difficult to argue against that idea that we should look around us for evidence. And the only people that Sven is referring to that don't think that think that empiricism is like, ridiculous. Well, to me, that just means they don't understand what empiricism is. And that could be true. Yeah, could be quite a few people who have no idea about that, who have no idea about the power of evidence.
To anybody listening, when I use the word bullshit, I'm being very, very specific. So there's
Not
this
about
Harry
the
Frankfurt
feces
paper
from a
called
bull,
On Bullshit, and I've
presumably,
adopted the meaning that he has as a philosopher. So bullshit, when I say it, I'm referring to any speech that is intended to persuade without any regard or concern for whether or not the things being said are actually true. So when someone tells me, like, I believe in ghosts, and tries to tell me about the reasons why they believe in ghosts, and they'll start to try to persuade me, it inevitably is just this like avalanche of fallacies and nonsense. And when I start to talk to them about that, why I can't follow them to their conclusion based on how they're trying to lead me there, then the concern for truth breaks down very, very quickly, and they retain the belief. So that's where I attach the label of bullshit to a belief.
Yeah, the last thing I just want to know is I would say warn skeptics or whoever to maybe be wary of saying that people don't care about the truth. I very much care about the truth. I don't know if you've noticed from this call, but I've looked into pan-sarcasm. I've looked into tons and tons and tons and tons.
Yeah, but you think empiricism
it may be more accurate for me to say.
Anthony
Magnabosco called me out on this.
Matters to me
too, because I'll say like people don't really care about what's true, and what I should be saying is that the degree to which they care about whether things they believe, whether or not it's true, it's inconsistently applied. They might care very much about whether or not their tax returns are accurate, but they might not care as much about whether or not the Bible is the literal, word of God. So that's really kind of more what I mean is that people are very inconsistent with how they apply skepticism in their day-to-day lives. That's what I mean. So I appreciate you calling me out.
I really appreciate that you're asking questions and that you're trying to be honest with yourself, and that you're asking these questions, that you're trying to find out about truth and spirituality and skepticism and all that. I'm really, really happy for you. Do you mind maybe doing a little bit more research and then kind of telling us where you are a little bit later? Because I think that you sound like you're on a journey and your opinions may be shifting slightly. Is that,
Yeah, I've called Dan a lot on Truth Wanted. I have been looking at last year, the past 4 years, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So, thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
So awesome. Thank you, Wayne, for calling. You're on with Jenna and Kenneth. Can you please start off with the proof, and then we can look to verify it after you present it?
Oh, proof.
Okay. Hi. Hi, Kenneth and Jenna. The tribulation begins on Thursday in Israel.
What?
Does it?
The tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble.
Oh.
I immediately wonder if this is serious. This is not the evidence, so you're already kind of fucking up. Like, I don't believe this is serious now. Can you just like leak the evidence? I don't mean to be rude, but we're short on time.
Okay, I've been revealed a prophecy. I've held on to it for.
So hold on. Before you go into specifics about the prophecy, let's go into the legitimacy of prophecies.
Oh boy.
Why should I believe that prophecies are accurate?
Have you ever seen a miracle?
No, I don't know what a miracle is necessarily. I don't know how.
What about a lamp? What about a lamp that has not even close to enough oil to last an entire night, being left on the dashboard of a car in winter?
Oh, this is boring as hell.
In the morning, being able to be relit with not a lighter, not a match, but only the addition of oil.
You're saying that you've witnessed this?
Using a cotton wick.
Are you saying that you've witnessed this firsthand?
Yes, it was my confirmation that I was supposed to reveal what I know, but I waited until I was more sure.
So what did this prove? This lighting a candle with oil. Okay, what did this prove?
So if you are at all familiar with Judaism, you might be aware
I'm not
of
very.
Olive trees and olive oil with
a lamp burning
with Israel. So I'll just so you have an idea where I'm coming from. It's basically Messianic Judaism, without any
in just a moment
any doctrine published post death of Jesus. So obviously I accept the existence of Jesus and everything that's popularly believed about him.
Yeah, bro, I believe you. I bet you accept a lot of stuff. But where's the evidence that we were going to talk about?
So there was this little lamp kit that I saw was available for sale at a place that I working as a chimney sweep. I'm blue collar, so I'll get that out of the way. And I bought this kit because I was curious whether it would work, whether the wick would work. And it was basically a wick and a piece of wire that was wound in a fashion to hold the wick. And then I went to the Dollar Tree, which is a dollar store that's available in the region, and I found this very small votive candle holder.
and I got some olive oil, extra virgin Pompeii brand, if it matters, and I put it in there.
Just really quickly,
yeah.
Can I just, because you said the thing a minute ago about the lamp lighting when you don't, anyway, so the lamp lit under conditions where you're under the impression that it should not have or could not have lit.
Yeah. It was impossible. Yes.
So
the materials.
Okay. So here's where we're going. So how do we tell the difference between something that you don't have an explanation for and something that is a miracle?
Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the paradox. You're not going to believe me until it happens.
Wayne, still here.
First, answer the question.
Sorry, I'm not trying to do
it. We can continue with whatever you want to say.
I'm sorry, I'm a little excited. Could you restate the question, please?
Yeah, the question is just this. How do we tell the difference between something that we don't have an explanation for and a miracle?
Well, it was the way that I can only use my method. The way that I used was that an uncommon event occurred at a convenient time, and through even though I'm a super skeptic, and I know that's going to that can be addressed in a number of ways that are not favorable to myself, even implying that because of what I believe, but I designed an experiment based on my education to derive that this was a highly unlikely event to occur.
Okay, Wayne is not super skeptical. Highly unlikely, I would argue, is not correct, even without knowing. A miracle, by my definition, and from everything that I've read where someone said what a miracle was, a miracle is an event that occurs that basically breaks the laws of our universe. Something that, like, someone is dead, they are dead, they're not like dead for like a minute and then the doctors bring them back. They are dead, they've been dead and for a couple of days, and then suddenly the decomposition is reversed and they're brought back to life. You literally take water which has got nothing that can turn it into to wine. We've got to add to do that, and you suddenly turn it into wine. You walk on water and you do not sink, and you're not using some kind of inflatable mechanism to help you. Those are miracles. Miracles are events that will effectively break the laws of the universe. Not an experiment with a bit of oil in a lamp the next day. There's so not a description of actually what's going on here. As a physicist, I'm seriously unimpressed.
So how do we tell the difference between a highly unlikely event to occur and a miracle?
Can I just ask you? Can I ask one question too? Because that question's still on the table.
Okay.
But Wayne, let me just ask you one more thing.
Shut up.
Let me ask you one more thing. Have you ever heard of somebody winning the Powerball?
Of course I have.
So that is a very, very improbable thing to happen to somebody, but it happens to somebody like multiple times a year. Someone hits a Powerball jackpot. And for a lot of those people, it's happening at like a time where they're poor. They can really use the money, even if they, so what's the difference?
Okay, maybe I'm being imprecise in my language. It is an impossible non-zero event.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
that means it should fundamentally it's impossible to happen because a cotton wick should not retain a glowing tip.
So I asked you, what does that mean? What does a
non-zero in terms of probability and calculus, although I didn't take more than one calculus course, I'll admit to that.
I'm asking you what is the definition of that non-zero thing that you said?
Gibberish.
That means that the event is 99.9999999 repeated up to a million decimals.
Bullshit.
A million, exactly. How did we come to that?
I don't know how you calculated that.
It's impossible.
It doesn't feel real.
It's
This
impossible.
doesn't.
No, it's rubbish.
And
Wayne's
how do you know
talking
that?
rubbish.
Stabbing a rock and getting, it's like stabbing a rock and getting human blood. It's that impossible.
Or like lighting a lamp with oil.
No, it's more like what Jenna just said.
that I've used previously on a number of occasions in the car by myself, considering things. It was a devotional thing that I did
It's a bit weird,
in my residence, and it never lasted longer than maybe 2 hours. And I sleep a long time. I was unemployed at the time.
You know what? You know what, Wayne? I really appreciate you calling, but you really haven't answered any of these questions.
Yeah, just the thing about how do we tell the difference between we can even go with, forget miracle. How do we tell the difference between something that we don't have an explanation for and something that's impossible?
Well, we've already asked him that, and I don't think we're going to get
you can't answer that.
We have two other callers, Wayne.
Yeah, let's move on.
I'd
please,
like to give them a chance. Thank you so much for calling. I hope that you can call back again.
The probability of us moving
on
now, I think, is quite high. Please, well done, Jenna.
So
the girl. That was a quick finger. Well done.
And we were like,
Wayne was a bullshitter.
So we have David in Washington.
Says
that you have spiritual experiences point to the existence of God.
Okay.
Thanks for calling, David. You're on with Jenna.
Why is there no science in this?
So can you explain that, please?
Yep. So pretty much, I am convinced that there has to be some sort of spiritual thing out there. I wouldn't even call it maybe even a being or a god, but just some sort of spiritual being.
Whatever that means.
For the fact that there's been not millions, but billions of people throughout history that have been part of organized religion, and I guess billions that have had so-called spiritual experiences. And I just don't think that I couldn't say that.
He's appealing to the numbers.
Dismissed like everybody's spiritual experience that they've had and say that it's just all false. I guess that's
what about aliens? There's a lot of people
how can we know that a
we've got
spiritual
aliens
existence
and they've been
necessarily
abducted.
First, let's start with your definition of God.
I don't really think that. I personally believe in God, but I don't think that there would be.
But what is your definition? What is your definition? What is a God?
Some type of a higher force, not even a being, just some type of a higher force.
What does that mean? A higher force than what?
Some type of a higher force that has some sort of a being. Yeah, a being that you could say like.
Am
God,
I a being?
Out of the Bible or something like that. Yes, but a higher force that created the universe, or has some
higher, like six floors higher than me, or
higher in the sense of like powerful, in that sense of like outside.
Somebody who can bench more than me.
Well, just someone outside the physical. But my main point is.
No, I'm genuinely confused. Like I don't understand what you're getting at.
All right. Well, my main point is there's been billions of people throughout history that have had spiritual.
No, I don't want to talk about. I want to talk about what a God is, though.
But David doesn't know that.
I want to figure out what is this thing that you believe exists. What is it?
Well, I just believe it's a spiritual being that I guess that started the universe in that sense. Like it's the driving cause.
So could I qualify the Big Bang as God? Like the event of Big Bang? Could I say that's God? Because that is what.
Maybe an act of a God.
So why would we assume that? And why would we? I don't even know what a God is. I don't know how we would know that the Big Bang came from God because I don't even know what that is.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, that's not. I'm not trying to argue. I'm just trying to argue that there's been billions of people throughout history that have had spiritual experiences, and you'd have to, I guess, dismiss every single one of them to say that.
There's an interesting issue here which I'll not push because it's getting quite late now and we're coming towards the end here. But first of all, he's talking about there are billions of people that have had spiritual experiences. He doesn't know that. He's just saying that. The idea that we have a stat for that, I think, is a little bit far-fetched. But the idea here that someone has a spiritual, when somebody says that they have experienced something that is spiritual, or even more, they've experienced a supernatural event or a miracle, there was the issue of my memory was in India. The sun decided it was going to move around the sky in a really weird way. It was absolute rubbish. Most of these events, when they're looked into, when we have the opportunity to look into them, they turn out to be rubbish. There is no evidence to suggest that there was anything supernatural that occurred. And this spiritualist, it's meaningless, absolutely meaningless, without evidence. And to say, oh, well, I'm going to appeal to the fact that, there's millions of people that believe this, or there's billions of people that believe this. Therefore, a billion people can't be wrong, can they? Well, yeah, a billion people can be wrong. Sadly, you can get a billion sheep as well. People will follow because they feel that they need to, because they want something in their life that they're missing. They're looking for a purpose. And sadly, they don't always find their own purpose. I'm not trying to be horrible to people, because that's not my thing. But I'm just saying that there's plenty of evidence that people don't think very much about their beliefs when it comes to religion. They just go with the flow. There's lots of evidence for that. And most people will look around them, see theists, and realize, even the ones that go to church, they don't really think very much about their belief, and they certainly don't behave like they would profess is important for their religion. So I think this is meaningless drivel.
It's not outside spiritual experiences. They didn't see demons, ghosts.
But now you're talking about spiritual experiences. I just want to know what a God is. Like I promise you, I am not trying to be obtuse. I'm genuinely not. These are the questions that I asked myself, and I found out I don't have the answer. I can't even define what a God is. So why am I advocating for it?
Well, I would just say an outside, spiritual being outside the realm of reality.
What's spiritual?
I guess that I would say.
Spiritual is the word of the realm of reality.
What is it? Non-reality. What is that?
Well, there's reality, right, around us, matter, stuff that we can touch, but maybe it's invisible or something that affects it.
Like air.
So maybe it's invisible. Doesn't tell me what spirituality is. You know what I mean?
Right. But but people throughout history have had spiritual experiences that have.
But why do you keep talking about people throughout history? Like let's talk about right now in the present moment.
Right.
What spiritual means and why you think that makes what a God is.
Okay, so I know there's a next caller, so I want you guys to get to him, but just I know that how I see it is spiritual is non-reality in the sense of there's reality among us, like the couch or desk in front of you or the sun in front of you, that's reality. Something that's invisible, right? Like I would say maybe, I guess gravity in that sense. Gravity might be it's a physical force, but you can't, I guess, see it. You can see the effects of it.
Physical force.
So gravity is spiritual?
No, I was just using gravity as an example. Maybe gravity's not spiritual, but
so don't. I really prefer if you didn't give me an example of something that is spiritual to define what spiritual. I want to know, what does spiritual mean? Because all you're giving me is that God is a spiritual being, and I'm a being. But I'm not a God. So I need to really understand what the word spiritual means.
I think it's time to move on, to be honest.
Like human spirit, it's okay, yeah, God. I guess just God of any type of God, any type of demon, any type of ghost, any type of God.
So you're saying that a God is a spiritual being, and a spiritual being is a God. Correct?
It sounds to me like you're referring to sort of like a supernatural realm.
But I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, well, supernatural realm,
like non-existent, non-reality.
Right. So I guess the one, how the Bible talks about it in that sense of there being a God, a creator of the world. But I mean, again, my main point is like, I don't know how you guys would, I guess, dismiss billions of people's.
Do you want to hear? Do you want to hear how?
Go for it, Kenneth.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever looked into any like informal fallacies?
Kinda, yeah.
Really?
So I'm going to throw one at you, which is an appeal to popularity, which is exactly how you began this call. So if throughout history, the vast majority of people who lived and died believed that illness and disease were caused by evil spirits, is that a good reason to believe that illness is caused by evil spirits? As opposed to like germs.
Right, but if you say
no, don't say but, David. Answer the question.
Like germs and bacteria and those evil stuff, like disease.
You're not going to find germs and bacteria in the Bible. You're going to find witchcraft and evil spirits and all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, and I can even simplify it further.
Kenneth, you need to push David here.
The central question is, when is it time to believe a claim?
I think when there's billions of people behind that claim.
No, that's the fallacy. That's the ad populum. That's the appeal to popularity. That is a good way to be wrong.
I think that's really good, strong evidence for something to be out there.
It isn't.
Okay, so David, just to take it back even a step further. So what a fallacy is an error in reasoning. So the idea is that if you've got a conclusion that is supported by a fallacy, then we don't have any way of knowing or verifying that that conclusion is true, okay? It could be true, but we can't know that it's true. So if you're saying X is true because lots of people believe X is true, that's a fallacy. That's $1,000. Lots of people have won the Powerball.
Right.
That's the question.
I get that.
No, well,
so whether or not lots of people believe something is irrelevant to whether or not the thing they believe is true.
And real quick, I know you got to go into.
Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do agree with that premise. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that fallacy. It's just my main thing is just like.
Jim, press this button.
Again, I don't think anybody can prove it, or I don't think there is. In your guys' in your guys' face, that's not strong evidence. To billions of people, that is strong evidence.
So that's their problem, because if they're evidentiary. Yeah, if their evidentiary standards are so low that they're going to accept fallacious bullshit to then be like, yeah, that's evidence. And God, this is a whole other thing. I swear I wasn't going to get into this today. So I'm stuck on evidence. Okay, I hear people use the word evidence, and it drives me nuts, because to my mind, evidence is anything that can be used to demonstrate that a claim is true. If something can't be used to demonstrate that a claim is true, to me, that shit ain't evidence. If someone tells me Jesus is God, and I go, how do you know? And they say, I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich yesterday. That ain't evidence, because you can't link the peanut butter and jelly sandwich to the claim.
Yeah, I mean, I want to send in a photo, because like last week I tried to send in a photo. It didn't work.
No, I'm not. So hold on. Did you hear what Kenneth just said?
Is this the cloud guy? The crosses in the sky guy? I heard your call.
Yeah, from last week.
I wanted to send you guys that. I feel like that's evidence, because I can't just say there's evidence, right, without presenting. So I'll do like the spiritual thing.
Okay, so go ahead and think about that for a little bit. Call back when you have the evidence, and
let's not wait for a photo that won't come through.
Thank you, David, so much.
No,
send it in.
I'll send that in.
Okay, thanks so much, David.
It'll be some rubbish.
Okay, really quick. We have Terry in Montreal, Canada. It says, I have proof that Jesus is God. Not only that God exists, but Jesus is God.
Better not be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Thank you, Terry, for calling. You are talking to Jenna and Kenneth. Is it possible to prove this really quickly? Like, to just give the proof and then we'd be done with it? Terry? Oh. I didn't hit talk yet. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Terry, you're on now.
Yeah. So we'll do this quick. You said you want evidence. I will provide you with the goods and services. Okay. I have two infallible premises that demonstrate Jesus is God. First premise: the God of the Hebrews makes exclusive claims to the 7-day cycle.
Well, first, can you define what a God is? You're starting off with the God in your premise, and you're using that to prove what a God is. I don't think that follows.
Okay, so let me rephrase it then. The Hebrews claim that the God of Scripture is
you're still using the word God to prove what a God is. I don't see how you can justify that.
No, I will prove that he is God by demonstrating that he has power over all humanity.
But I don't know what God is. So you're telling me that Jesus is God.
You don't need to know what God is or who God is. Just what you need to understand what you need to understand is that he predicted the universal submission of the world. And as a
why do I need to understand that? Why do I need to understand that at all?
Because that means he has power over you. That's what.
So if I don't understand that, then that means that he doesn't have power over me. I'd rather not understand that.
Even if you don't understand it, you're still submitted to his will, because he predicted the universal application of the 7
So then it doesn't matter if I understand that. Then
what is the 7 day cycle?
You don't have to understand it. You're submitted to it.
You just said I have to understand that.
What is the 7 day cycle? What is the 7 day cycle?
You count to 7 and you do it all over again. He established that in Genesis 1, and he predicted the universal application of the 7 day cycle as a demonstration of his power over all humanity. In Isaiah
don't know what a God is.
23.
Rubbish.
You don't have to know what a God is.
Bloody warped logic with these people. What the heck do they think? How do they live a life and are not scammed constantly? Absolutely ridiculous. The idea that a bunch of people would have this kind of like a 7 day week, and that we've got a 7 day week, and somehow that's evidence of anything. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's so, again, I kind of fall back on the fact that as a physicist, this kind of warped logic is really kind of painful in the head.
All you know is that he submitted.
It's frustrating.
Why do I need to know that? Why? You just said, so you said, you need to know this. And then I said, why? And then you said, you don't really need to know that. And I said, okay, well then what's a God? And you said, well, you need to know this. I don't think you really know what you're saying. If you have anything to say to Terry before we end this show.
Yeah, no problem. Whether you understand or not, he predicted that
You're muted. Kenneth, do you have anything to say to Terry before we move on?
I'm caught up on the 7 day cycle thing. Is he saying it because there's there's 7 days in a week that's proof of God?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
You are unmuted, Terry.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that he's the author, and then he predicted it 2,000 years ago that he would use that as a sign of his authority over all nations. All nations have been submitted to a 7 day cycle. That is the proof.
You're saying that So wait. If I'm following you, just to make sure. So you're saying that because the majority of people globally use a calendar that utilizes a 7 day week, that's proof of the Hebrew God?
Which we can't even define.
What I'm saying is all nations kept a different cycle to honor their gods, and Jesus said he would submit all nations to a 7 day cycle, and then the last nation to be submitted is USSR in the 1940s. So since the 1940s, all nations have been submitted to Jesus Christ as he predicted. So he has power over all nations, which includes you.
Have you verified this? Have you looked at every single nation and verified this?
What did you say?
Have you verified that, what you just said?
Yes. Egypt kept a 10 day cycle. Babylon kept an 8 day cycle.
How did you verify this?
It's history. You gotta have to read a book.
So I just need to read a book and I can know that?
I mean,
all the scholars verify this.
You may need to read more books. You may need to read more books because yes, there have been a number of different cycles as you're describing them throughout history. The reason why the Gregorian calendar, if you look at the spread of this idea of a 7 day week, oh my God, I don't conquest is a thing. I mean, the fact that the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its official religion and then spread that's part of why it spread. This is very it's a reach, but I'm interested in the second premise if you're still there.
Nope, I actually dropped him because we went 15 minutes over and we have so much to unpack with that gentleman and he's talking way too fast, not listening, and so we don't really have time for that right now.
There you go.
I really hope he calls back though. I really genuinely do. I'd love to talk to you, just we literally don't have the time to even begin with that right now. So thank y'all so much for watching and thank you crew so much for handling everything, for getting some really good callers for us today, for being grape soda, apparently.
We've switched from the sentient orange soda to the sentient grape soda.
Thank you all so much. I hope that if anybody needs help, that you can join one of our Facebook groups, that you can contact Recovering from Religion, that you can utilize the Secular Therapy Project if it's available, and get all the help that you need. But either way, thanks.
Okay, I think it's about time. So I'll just pause that there and say that, again, another one where there wasn't huge amounts of science this week, again, like last week, and very little in the way of physics, although there was some really good examples of warped knowledge, of some interesting fallacies, like the appeal to popularity. If something is wrong but millions of people believe it, that doesn't make it right. It just means millions of people are wrong. For those of you who are doing physics courses, then you might want to consider that with respect to evidence. If you've got evidence that's poor, what do we mean by that? It could be that you're doing an experiment and actually the experiment is not very well controlled, so your data is very, very imprecise, and probably not accurate either, although those two things mean different things. If you do repeat measurements, you've just got an awful lot more of imprecise data. So I'll kind of leave that because that gets quite complicated. I'm going to finish now by saying that I'm sorry there wasn't huge amounts of science this week for us to kind of pause and consider, but you know, it's still good. It's still good to listen to discussion and argument, and a discussion of fallacies is also very interesting because that prevents us from following those kind of routes ourselves and making mistakes and getting scammed and all those kind of things. And please take care of yourself. Be happy. Don't take stupid risks with your health, because that's not a good thing. As soon as you get the opportunity, get a vaccine. Don't be one of these strange people who kind of into conspiracies and the vaccine is a way of them kind of injecting us with it's a way of them injecting us with trackers. Absolute rubbish. Can you conceive of the number of doctors in the world that would have to agree with this and keep quiet about it? I know doctors, they're at times quite rebellious. There's no way it would work. Get vaccinated, stay safe, stay healthy, be good, and make sure you're kind to your parents. Take care.